the City of Eugene. Today, I am joined by a work group of the Human Rights Commission, Whole Eugene Community United. This work group is responsible for the production of the Marginalized Voices report, and in this report, it provides results of information gathered from a number of focus groups made up of representatives from marginalized communities. The report puts forth recommendations to better serve and support these communities in Eugene. Today, representatives from the work group are here to share prioritized recommendations and the progress the city has made, and to provide you all with to receive feedback from all of you. I would like to present Bonnie Souza, the Human Rights Commissioner who leads the WeCU work group, and Ib Hamida, a Human Rights Commissioner and member of the WeCU work group.
Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon. My name is Bonnie Souza. I'm a member of the Eugene Human Rights Commission, as she just told you, and I chair the work group called Whole Eugene Community United, or WeCU for short. I want to thank you, Mayor Vinnis, and all of the city councilors for holding this work session, particularly Councilor Semple for helping make this happen, this work session, and also staff and the city managers and human rights offices for helping our work group with this presentation. I would like to introduce WeCU work group members who are here today. I don't know that we have additional commissioners here. Well, yes, some of whom will also serve on the WeCU work group. Of course, Commissioner Ib Hamida, who is presenting with me today. And if you could stand up or motion with your hand when I say your name. Andrew Thompson, Daniel Borson, Ibrahim Koulibaly, and Chris Nalango. And we also have, by co-author here, Ken Newbeck of the Marginalized Voices report. Ib Hamida and I are here today to present the Human Rights Commission's report, Marginalized Voices in Eugene, the process we undertook to complete the report, and our request for expedited action on a few prioritized recommendations. In 2015, former Commissioner Ken Newbeck and I began the process of holding what started as 6 and grew to 10 focus groups in marginalized communities in Eugene. While there are certainly additional marginalized communities, for example, the immigrant, Jewish, and unhoused communities, passing time dictated our need to stop organizing focus groups and complete the report, particularly since Ken's term on the HRC was coming to a close. The process we used to carry out the focus groups followed human rights principles in that we actively invited input and involvement from those community members who most directly experience discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion. Although our process was not scientific, we believe it is an accurate representation of the experiences of many in marginalized communities in Eugene and likely beyond. Commissioner Newbeck and I began by drafting a set of questions to be used in each of the focus groups. We circulated our questions among contacts in various marginalized communities, asking for any suggested changes to our draft. We took their feedback into account, finalized the questions, and with the help of community contacts, set out to pull together our focus groups. Each group had between 6 and 10 members, making sure that at least 2 were youth, which we consider to be between 16 and 27 years old. Overall, approximately 1/3 of the participants were youth. We learned as we went along and ended up adding 4 focus groups to our original 6. A few examples. When planning for the first Latinx group, we were advised that we should consider holding a separate focus group for Latinx families, people who are often newer immigrants with children in our schools and issues particular to their experience. We also decided to hold 2 separate focus groups, one for Asian Americans and another for Pacific Islanders, rather than categorizing these 2 groups together as had been done in past years. And though we held an LGBTQ focus group, we also decided to organize a separate group solely for members of the trans community. These were all wise decisions given the particularity of the experiences of these various groups of people. After completing 10 focus groups, Ken and I began drafting our report. We decided to break down the volume of information shared by participants into themes and presented their experiences this way. The themes in the report are characteristics of discrimination, intersectionality, institutional expressions of discrimination, which includes the city and law enforcement, hostile political environment, microaggressions, isolation and need for safe space, differences within communities, and needs of communities. For each of the themes, we provide a description of what we are referring to and example statements we heard from each community in that themed area. Ken and I had two purposes in mind in organizing these focus groups. Having both worked professionally and for many years on issues of racism and discrimination, now in retirement, we both wanted straight, white Eugenians, city staff and council members included, to glean a better understanding of the real-life experiences of marginalized communities in our hometown. And two, we wanted marginalized community members to gain increased awareness of the similarities and differences in life experiences across marginalized communities and cultures in Eugene. In short, we wanted to bring people closer together in understanding each other. Again, following human rights principles, calling for involvement of those directly experiencing human rights violations, we drafted the report and recommendations, shared it with all of the focus group participants, took their feedback into account, and finalized the report. It was unanimously approved by the Human Rights Commission at our June meeting last year and forwarded to the Mayor and City Council the following month. Finally, Ken and I ultimately hoped to be able to bring the voices of all these marginalized groups and others to the table to create a new HRC work group that could help us move forward in behalf of marginalized communities in Eugene. We wanted involvement of these communities to be institutionalized as we seek to have our recommendations heard and implemented. So once the report was finalized, I took the next step and began inviting participants from each focus group to join the HRC work group that I had been co-chairing with Ken Newbeck. It was just he and I at the time and had been called the Anti-Discrimination Work Group. I was humbled and pleased that almost every person I invited said yes, they would be part of this new Human Rights Commission work group. In the past year, the work group has renamed itself Whole Eugene Community United, or We See You, and developed a vision statement. We organized a successful celebration of International Human Rights Day 2017, held in December last year. Mayor Vinnis presented a proclamation. There were multicultural speakers, performances in foods, a children's corner with crafts and books, and multiple organizations tabling, all in a family-friendly setting. And last, VCU members have spent a considerable amount of time discussing and prioritizing the recommendations and goals in the Marginalized Voices report. Today, we are pleased to formally present this report, and I would like to now turn this over to Commissioner Ib Hamide to talk about the progress the city has made in addressing these goals, and also the specific action items we are respectfully asking the City Council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Hello, everyone. Of the 9 short-term goals and the 5 long-term goals in the Marginalized Voices report, today I would like to highlight 3 of the goals and the progress that the city has made on them. Short-term goal number 1 reads, implement a rapid response policy for immediate public response by top city officials, such as the mayor, city council chair, city manager, chief of police, to hate crimes and other activities that threaten to bring harm to vulnerable communities in Eugene. People with power and voice need to show vulnerable communities that they care. City progress on this goal is Equity and Community Consortium Chief Administration Officers are working to develop a public response when hate activity occurs. I think John Reese is chair of that, is that correct? Yeah. The current process alerts mayor, city council, and city manager, as well as EPD and HRNI staff when a hate crime occurs. Short-term goal number 3 reads, charge the HRNI office with making the Rights Assistance Program, known as RAP, much more visible and user-friendly to marginalized communities, and reporting quarterly to these communities on the type of complaints received by RAP and from which group, along with their disposition. City progress on this goal is HRNI overall goal is to increase awareness and educate the community on the reporting process to capture a larger percentage of hate and bias activity in Eugene. HRNI engages in outreach to groups representing marginalized populations in Eugene and educate about the reporting process. HRNI hosted a hate crime forum with federal, state, and local law enforcement, community organizers, and members of some of the marginalized population to educate the community on hate crime activity and on the reporting process. HRNI is releasing a hate and bias prevention and response toolkit to deliver resources and training in a concise location for community members and organizations to prepare for and respond to acts of hate in the community. A long-term goal number 2 reads, expand cultural competency and gender diversity awareness training for all city employees, including police, which focuses on marginalized communities in Eugene, and open the training up to teachers and administrators at the 4J and Bethel schools. Seek recommendations directly from marginalized community members as to which training and trainers would be most effective. Progress that the city made on this goal is HRNI expanded training opportunities for staff to include Ally 101, Ally 201, how to read, to report hate and bias, culturally responsive customer service training, implicit bias training, TED Talk discussions, and book clubs. Also, HRNI has held some training for LCC and Lane County staff and has potential to partner with equity and community consortium members. We see you and the Human Rights Commission appreciates the mayor's expressed support for the Marginalized Voices report and the progress that the city has made already in implementing some facets of our recommendations. Today, we would like to request expedited action by the mayor and the city council on few specific recommendations that we see you has prioritized. One, we see you considers the implementation of short-term goal number 2, which is hiring/assisting assigning a full-time liaison to serve as a bridge between the city of Eugene and the marginalized communities as an essential resource to help implement all of the recommendations in the Marginalized Voices report. We believe a positive outcome would be for the City Council to articulate ways that the liaison could fulfill existing city policy goals, while simultaneously creating efficiencies in the delivery of the city services to meet those goals, and B, for the liaison position to find a place in the city manager's budget next year. 2, given the rise of white nationalism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and racist attacks across the country, both verbal and physical, as well as the current policies and rhetorical attacks by the federal administration that aim at marginalized communities. We see you would like the City of Eugene to place an immediate emphasis on developing and implementing a rapid response policy by top city officials on hate crimes and other threatening activities against vulnerable communities, as stated in short-term goal number 1. 3, as means to move towards creating a long-term, safe, and supportive space for Eugene's marginalized communities, and also as part of the preparation for the IAAF World Championships Oregon 2021, we see you requests that a planning committee for a centrally located multicultural center in Eugene be established as described in short-term goal number 6 and long-term goal number 1. We understand that the city staff have committed to considering the full-time liaison position as part of the proposed budget process. Continuing work on developing a rapid response process to hate crimes and other threatening acts, and moving forward with establishing a city planning committee for a centrally located multicultural center. We appreciate these efforts and are also asking for your stated policy support for these items. At this time, we would like to open this up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I will just repeat what I have said to you, over the past year, which is that I consider this report so valuable, and I really appreciate the work that went into it and how thorough it is, and how thoughtful the recommendations are, and how thoughtful this presentation is to us, which I think is a great contribution to our making some deliberative, really thoughtful changes about how we conduct ourselves and how we think about our community. So I do want to thank you very much for that work. And I am opening this for comments. I have Claire. Take it away, Claire.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, so very, very much for all. I want to thank everyone who is involved. So the work group members, the commission members, and the people who helped organize, and then also who participated in the focus groups. It's a great deal of work that went into preparing the report and also preparing for today's session. So a really huge appreciation for all of that. As Bonnie Souza described, the process that you used for determining how the focus groups where they would be, who would be there, it is obvious that a great deal of thought and careful consideration went into the methodology that you used. And I think it shows up in the report that was a result of all that work. And, I think it really helped you achieve or move towards this goal that you also stated, Bonnie, of helping people in the community to understand each other's experiences better and to bring us closer together as a community. So I really want to call that out and appreciate that. And could you put back the slide with the city responds with the headlines? Yeah. So I think this sampling of headlines from over the past year or so provides a sobering reminder of what is at stake as we consider how the city can be a partner in creating a safe and welcoming community for all of our residents. And I want to thank the city manager for the administrative order and work that you've done in starting to implement many of these recommendations. It's very, very important. And I also think it's equally important that this council take a position supporting those recommendations, which I do, and I hope that the majority of council will as well. And those are the continuing recommendations for the full-time liaison and a planning group to look at the multicultural center and the other recommendations. So I'm encouraged to hear mention that city staff is already looking at how that might, that full-time position might be folded into the upcoming budget process. That's very encouraging. I think funding a liaison position would really show our commitment to improving how we provide city services to those who may feel alienated from some of our core city services, such as our library, parks, and public safety. And I think representing that commitment by having a dedicated staff person to help us carry out that mission really speaks volumes to the community about the depth of our commitment to carrying out that work. So I'm supporting these recommendations. I know we don't have formal action today, but I just wanted to speak to that, and thank you again for all of your work.
Thank you. Chris, and then Emily.
Thank you. I'm really glad to see this finally coming forward. I mean, it was a lot of work that you've done, and I think we need to acknowledge just how much work that was. And I kind of wanted to say I support all three of the the high priority recommendations, but I wanted to kind of zero in on the second one, developing and implementing the rapid response by top officials. I think we absolutely need to do that, and delving a little more deeply into that, I think we need to think of what the message should be within that rapid response, because you can have a rapid response, but if you don't say something effective, then the message isn't really, you have to both the medium and the message in order to make something work. And what I want to kind of focus in on is there is both the conscious racism that we deal with, the graffiti, the flyers, the things like that. And we absolutely have to take a very strong stand on how we will deal with that conscious kind of racism and discrimination. But I think, and I've seen this in a lot of places I've lived, there's also that unconscious racism, the racism that we're not even aware that we're exhibiting. And I think part of what our message can be within number 2 is to also take the opportunity to say, there's some things you may not be aware that you're doing, but they're not okay. You shouldn't be doing those things. It's an educational opportunity, because I think if you look at the consciously racist people, that may be a smaller percentage than the people who are just, they don't even know when they're being racist. I'll read a letter to the editor, or I'll read an email that comes in, and somebody will unconsciously say something and go, well, wow, that's pretty racist. They don't even know it. It wouldn't even occur to them that that is a discriminatory thing to say. And I think if you just remind people that these kinds of things really are not okay, people will try to correct that behavior. You won't get everybody, but I think that can be a significant part of the message you want to convey, is we can be a better community if we're just a little more conscious of the unconscious things that we can do to promote discrimination. And people will say, well, that's not my problem. Okay, you got a neo-Nazi spraying swastikas on temples. That's not my problem. That's complicity. You're going along. And so we need to be able to help people to understand that saying it's not my problem is part of the problem. Or the way people can refer to something which indicates their bias that they might have. I remember reading a letter to the editor once where somebody talked about our black people. Who do they belong to? Or somebody who said, I really want to get involved in the community and really do something to help them. It's an unconscious thing. They're really wanting to do a good thing, but it's just a frame of reference that needs to be clarified. We can use number 2 to help, I think, promote that kind of unconscious side as well as the conscious side. Why not take that opportunity if we're going to have it available to us?
Thank you. Emily.
Thank you. Thank you to the commission. I'm very proud to be on this commission. We've done some amazing research and work. Bonnie and Ken have put in enormous hours on this project, and I encourage everyone to read it. It's long, but it includes personal responses from our marginalized people, and that's the easiest, most heartfelt way to understand what other people are going through, because I'm still always a white girl, and I need you to tell me what's going on. So I really appreciate it. Of the 3 recommendations, the one I'm most instantly interested in is the rapid response, because that's pretty cheap, and that's something that helps get it going. And it's something that I could do. But I don't know exactly what you want, and I imagine you've thought it out a little bit more. So I'm really would like to know what a rapid response would look like, what would it entail. Help me do it.
What I would say right up front is I think that this would be better for me to get direct input from members of the work group on this. Specifically, the recommendation was written as a rapid response to hate crimes or incidents. If something major happens, in addition to a robust process that the City of Eugene already has in place for reporting crimes, it would be really helpful to have top city officials have a policy in place or a plan to come out immediately with a message. I know you're asking about the message. I think that's something that, as this is developed, that we could certainly chime in, and I think that you could get some really good ideas from people who are actually from marginalized communities through this work group.
Well, that would be great, because the marginalized communities are the ones that I want
Right.
to help.
Right.
And of course, I'm not asking you to tell me today, this, Emily, is what you should do. The next time it happens, I will call you and you do it. That would be great. But, yeah, I like that. Go with that one. But I do want to know, what can we do? How can we do this? Because this is an easy one. This is a low-hanging fruit, that if something happens, that we have a plan where someone who is in a position of respect, I hope, and authority can make a statement. But I wouldn't really know what to do other than, this is horrible, I don't like it, we must stop. So I'm not asking you to do it now, but it seems like this is something we could do very quickly, to have some kind of phone tree or hierarchy, and something that the council agrees we would all want to say, and someone could actually say it.
You know, Ib has something to say on this, but one thing I want to say is that we will put this on our agenda and get some direct information to you, but I'm sure that we would be willing to sit down and talk with you about it as well.
And I appreciate this discussion on that, and I agree that it needs to be developed and to where it evolves into something more wholesome. And as Councilor Pryor has spoken to, of the prejudice and bias that we don't always wear on our sleeves. But I do think that the low-hanging fruit that you spoke of is really interesting and meaningful to marginalized communities, to see somebody from the city that has authority to say, not in our town, we don't approve of this. I think that shores up their safety and security when a temple is graffitied or rocks are thrown at it with swastikas all over them. There is a fear factor and a questioning by that community as to whether they belong in this, and is there anybody who's standing with us? So that standing with us, that message of standing with us, is a low-hanging fruit that, like you said, is cheap. It doesn't cost much, but it's vital.
Thank you, and I look forward to continuing this work. I really appreciate it, and I do support a liaison. It would be great to have a multicultural center. I need a few other centers too, but I'm in on that one. So thank you, and I appreciate your work and coming here today. It's not always that easy to come to council. That's what I'm finding.
Alan?
Not easy being on council. Thank you very much for all the work that you all have done. It's a great and very thorough report. Great process. I enjoyed reading about it and what you guys did, and the recommendations are wonderful, and it reflects a lot of work. So hats off to all of you for doing this. Took you what? A week and a half? No.
I just started my fourth year
Oh,
on the commission.
On this, yeah.
And
How
this
long
is-
did this take?
We started soon after I came on the commission, but we didn't have our first work group until February the following year, because all the preparation with the questions and reaching out to other communities.
Yeah, overnight success in 3 years.
Yeah, well, it just the way it is, and I'm happy about it.
Yeah, this is a very important issue, and I echo Claire's concerns. And we've made progress on this, but we're not at all at our goal of a safe and inclusive community for everybody. And recently, last year, had white supremacist posters plastered all over my neighborhood, and that was just not acceptable. And so we have to have to be in front of this, have this front and center as an issue with us, and be constantly reminded of that, of the inclusion, and fighting racism is something that we need to all be cognizant of and be working on all the time, because I think the biggest enemy of all of that is complacency. I support all three of these recommendations. I think they're great. I think we deserve an FTE. It reminds me of similar work that the police auditor's office is doing with the outreach to different communities. And so those two positions, I think, could work together. We definitely need a rapid response protocol process. the message of standing with them, I think, is a very important one, and we need to be able to get our act together, be able to do that quickly and effectively and forcefully. I'm really interested in hearing more about what a multicultural center looks like, what it would do, how it would be funded and sustained, and how we'd operate it. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about that.
I think that in the short-term goals, the idea was to put together a planning committee for that very purpose, so that we could discuss all of these issues. One thought I have that's down the road is if there is a liaison position ultimately staffed, that potentially that person could actually staff the center, and volunteers from all these marginalized communities that we have among us could have a space in that in that center with a large open area for celebrating different cultures and inviting, people having a place where all generations could be together, and the whole community could be more united.
I was visualizing a round building with the liaison in the center and then spokes of all these different offices with everybody sitting down there. Sounds like great. And finally, I just want to thank the city manager and staff for already beginning to work on these 3 recommendations. I think that's great.
If I could add one thing, just to emphasize that I think that our work group would be a great resource for the city in planning a multicultural center. And we met with Mayor Vinnis earlier in the year, and it was a very rich discussion. It was only an hour long, but we just got through a lot, and that is the value of diversity.
Thank you. Betty?
Thank you. Emily has her hand up. Thank you. There used to be a group that you were, Mr. Hamini, you were a part of, that I think helped people understand each other. What was that called?
The Eugene Middle East Peace Group was such group. Also, the Willamette World's Affairs Council, which I also was part of, and the Interreligious Committee for Peace in the Middle East. Those are 3 groups. Though they centered around discussions on the Middle East, they really went beyond that. And obviously that work was all undertaken in this community. So it brought some of those international issues, if you will, that we are experiencing in this community to the community flavor that we still live here. And I really think I know with the Eugene Middle East Peace Group specifically, I think it really built a lot of bridges for especially the Arab and the Jewish communities, to build bridges for them to cross over and see each other as human beings, not as issues, because oftentimes we forget that there's a human person underneath the issue that we're speaking about. And we, the Arabs and Jews, are very guilty of that. We point the finger at them as if they caused the conflict, not that they're inheritors of it. And so I think that really, with doing social activities, such as dinners, speakers, discussion groups, inviting outside speakers, all those humanized the issue. And once you see the other as a human being, a lot of stuff gets a little easier, So this just is across 11 different marginalized communities. So we're hoping to do that. Some of the fruition of that would result in similar results in
I thought that was excellent, and it was not government-sponsored at all.
Nope.
You made long-time friendships, didn't you?
I have, and they're the ones that you can't buy. You got to do them yourself. You got to be there and do sweat equity, but they're also lasting ones. So
I thought that was an excellent example. I knew several people involved at the time. It's been quite a while since that was active. I was reminded of when you talk about a liaison, we used to have someone who was a liaison for sister city committees. I think this is related. We have 4 sister cities. We do almost nothing to support those. They're all done by volunteers. The city does very little. I think that if we had such a liaison, what'd you call it, cultural, it should include the sister cities. I think we have, for different reasons, we need to be friends with everybody, but there are different reasons why we had special needs to be friends with Russia, Nepal, Japan, Korea. I know some people told me we should get rid of Nepal as a sister city because what will they do for us? And I thought, what will we do for them or what can we do for each other is a better way to look at it. And I was thinking too of, I would like us to pay more attention and devote more money actually to the sister city relationships. And I think it could be combined with what you're talking about or be a part of it. I think that we have ceremonial matters on the agenda now and then, and that might be a time when different groups could come, if there's a special holiday coming up, could come and maybe take 5 or 10 minutes and inform people about it. Like when Ramadan happens. A lot of people don't know what that is, or when it is, or why. And I think, too, we neglect relationships with the Native Americans who were here before all of us. And we should learn more about their customs and those are all things I think that could come in our few minutes of ceremonial matters, not the whole night, but when we have ceremonial matters at the beginning of our meetings. I think I'm running out of time, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you very much for the work. It's greatly appreciated. I was wondering if you might help me understand more deeply the second recommendation here. The response to hate crimes and other threatening acts. I think I understand hate crimes. Those seem to be things that are likely codified, that are in ordinance, I would think. But that seems rather broad, that second part tacked on there, and other threatening acts. And I was wondering if I might get more detail from you by what is discussed and meant by that phrase.
Well, those are probably long debates, and I'm sure splitting hairs would be part of the process of where freedom of speech begins and where incitement begins. And I'm no expert on that. I will leave it to the experts. I am fully committed to the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and defending it to people who totally oppose my opinions. That is a given.
Me too.
And I'm sure you are. But once a threat to a physical or verbal threat is issued, I think that takes it out of the realm of that and puts it into the police responsibilities issues. I think the safety of people is still paramount, and it's also constitutional. So I am no expert to speak about that, except to reiterate that I am totally committed to both, and I would like enlightenment by others as to what constitutes a threatening.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My question is more specific than that, and I appreciate your response. This is asking for action by the council and by other city officials. And it's a recommendation of the Human Rights Commission that we act on certain things. And so I'm trying to get at, did the Human Rights Commission come up with a specific list of description for what are other threatening acts that would constitute a response, or is that subjective to the moment?
Maybe Katie could help with that.
Absolutely. So there are a number of acts that at times come to the Eugene Police Department because they are motivated by hate or bias, though they may not rise to the level of a crime.
Right.
At that time, EPD officers will direct people to our office where we're able to help people who experience heinous acts while they may not necessarily be illegal. And there are resources available to help people navigate the systems or understand what resources are available to them. And it can be subjective because while things may not necessarily be a crime, there are things that may be protected by the First Amendment, and there also may be things that are offensive and harmful to communities that experience hate and bias activity. So I believe that this is intended to cover a number of items, including things that do not rise to the level of a crime.
And you're asking in this recommendation for council to become a part of that response. Is that correct?
Yes, for top city officials, including leadership and city council, to respond. We don't have a cookie cutter response. I think that the work group would be a valuable resource
Well,
for the discussion to come up with that answer for you.
Let me
And I'd
give
be
you
happy
my
to-
discomfort here, and it's that while I agree with you that there are plenty of times when offensive and hurtful and unfortunate things get said in the public sphere, whether they be in print or whether they be said. And I like the idea of the response of people standing together to build a kind of community where many, if not all, are accepted. I find it's regularly acceptable to say some very vicious things about some of our community members in the newspaper. And I wonder if you intend to include that, because I personally would love to see our public discourse become better on all fronts. I find it regularly challenging that it is not. Is that a part of this recommendation as well?
I don't know that that's part of the recommendation, an intended part of the recommendation. I mean, specifically what this is speaking to is a response to hate crimes and other threatening activities. Saying offensive things, I don't think is necessarily a threatening activity.
That's why I was working at the definition.
And this is why I said that I think it would be good for, for the council or whoever's interested in the city to take advantage of the work group members, the people that we're working with, because these are folks who are members of communities that are on the receiving end, and then we can parse that out.
Okay.
I don't think that that's not an easily answered question. It's a good question, but it's not an easily answered question.
I guess I would challenge the Human Rights Commission members to think of that differently. How can we all stand together more frequently on all fronts? Thank you.
I think it's a good challenge.
Emily?
Thank you. I'm interested in a couple of the other goals that you listed. First of all, the website, because that seems pretty low-hanging too. It takes time to make a web page, but I still think it's pretty doable. So, and I'm not looking for the answer right now, but I would like to hear from the work group more specifically what you'd like to have on the website, because I don't think that's going to take, any voting or anything to make it happen. But things go more quickly when you give someone a plan and more information. So I think that that's something that's totally doable and doable fairly quickly, and it could be done more quickly. from the people who already know what kind of information you'd like to hear, rather than me trying to guess. So I don't know what that takes, but let's get that going so we know what we want to do on the website. And then the other one I'm really interested in exploring a little more is the designated physical spaces for gathering for marginalized groups. This is something that we already have, rather than building a center or remodeling or making a specific center. So again, it's something that could happen quickly. And I'm wondering what kind of spaces, how will they feel safe, and how will they be different from anything that's available now? Because obviously what we have now isn't sufficing. So what do we have that we could use now? You know, that without building a new building. Designated city-owned physical spaces as gathering places. Give me some examples. Let's do it. And you don't have to do it right now.
Oh, okay.
That's just something I would like information about. I'm not asking you to do it today. But I think those are two things that we could do. We already have a website and physical places. We have a need. Let's make it happen. Thank you, all of you, for this very, very important work that gets noticed in some little ways, but most of us just have our lives and we don't notice, and we need the commission and the marginalized voices to keep speaking up so that we can hear and respond. And this is a great effort put forth by Ken and Bonnie and the whole commission, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give Betty a minute. I just wanted to make one comment, and then Betty, and then we'll close. And just to sort of wrap this up, a couple of pieces, which is on the rapid response, you know, Alan used the word protocol, and I think that's really what we're looking for, is what is the protocol and what's that quick, who's on deck in order to respond, and how quickly do they respond, and how do we support that and support that message. So I think that, you know, Katie has described that. You have some history with these threatening events that are not crimes. So there's a beginning of a framework there I think we can look at. Wanted to compliment Betty, because I really like that idea of the ceremonial matters, and that maybe there's a way of being more multicultural in our ceremonial moments in the council, and that's a lovely idea. And the final thing, partly to comment on what Emily has just said, is that we are talking, and the staff is moving forward on this idea of kind of recognizing 20 cultures in our community by 2021, and that's a plan that's rolling out, and it may be the kind of the shortcut to the Multicultural Center in the beginning to really recognize and work with the different communities within our community as a step towards, you know, creating that sort of multicultural feeling in our community, a higher level of recognition. So I'm with you. I'm really excited about your work and look forward to the work ahead. And Betty, I'll give you one more minute.
1 minute. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have several things to thinking about. I'll resort to saying you gave him more time.
You can have
If you want-
three
if you
need.
want to.
It was a turn of phrase.
Okay, thank you. Now, what was I thinking of? Oh, gathering places. We have Kesey Square, fortunately, where anyone can go. And as I keep saying, the city needs to help Mr. Imami open the walls. And possibly, he was talking about starting a business in one part of his building, but maybe we should offer to buy part of it and use it for a indoor gathering place, adjacent to the outdoor gathering place. Just an idea. And another idea another thing I've thought of before many times, and since I've been on council about 22 years, you can't identify whom I'm talking about, but there have been people who applied for the Human Rights Commission who were turned down because they were considered bigots. I wonder if it wouldn't be good to have a bigot or two on the commission. I think I have watched people, when they associate with other people and talk to them freely, begin to slowly change. And that's the end of all I wanted to say. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you all very much for your work, for your continuing work. We look forward to all these future conversations and progress. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Yes, the draw of a council process session may not be quite as interesting for the rest of the public.
Some of us.
Meetings about meetings.
The semi-annual meeting about meetings.
So, welcome. We're now ready for our second item of today's work session, which is a council process session. And so I'll turn it over to staff.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Becky DeWitt. I think I know you well. And Beth Forrest is here with me as well. Periodically, you take some time to review your. Can
you just move this up a little bit?
Up a little more? Yeah. Thank you. I'll talk louder, too. Thank you. So periodically, you take some time to review your working agreements, get some informational updates from staff, as well as consider any modifications or changes to your working agreements. So we're here today to talk about that. We'll give you an overview of some of the history of some of your work sessions. We'll talk about the goals that we think about when we're working to schedule your agenda and other items. Well, we've got some informational items to share, and we also have some options for consideration and discussion. This is just an overview of your average work sessions over the last 5 years. This is kind of where you've been spending your time in the work sessions. We've broken it down by work session polls, boards and commission activities, executive sessions, staff updates, which include council-requested staff updates, as well as staff updates to keep projects moving forward, policy development, and then other items. As we work with you, we want to keep in mind that we want to be mindful about getting council the right information at the right time to help inform your decision-making. We've also been working on making sure that as we schedule the agenda, we're scheduling the agenda so that you can make some progress on your council goals and areas of focus. And then we also want to leave some flexibility to respond to emerging items. Communications becomes incredibly important on all fronts, and one of the things that we've identified could use some improvement and is our process to respond to mayor and council emails as well as mayor and council requests. We really want to focus on timeliness and building trust with our community by being responsive to those requests. We also want to track our responses just so we have a sense of that. I'm going to jump into an updated process real quick, and then I'll come back to the other communication items. So the mayor and council emails, information requests come in a number of ways. Certainly there's a question or concern for staff that can be addressed. There's informational or just opinion items, and then sometimes there's some ambiguous emails as well. Regarding the information or opinion items, the mayor and council, as well as our public information team members, all receive that information. Community members that send information or send something to that email address will get an automated thank you response. For any questions or items of concern that come in, we'll be utilizing our public information team members, which are embedded in every department, to help identify whether or not their department can assist in responding and providing the appropriate information. And then they will forward that information on to staff. A response will be generated, and then as appropriate, either the entire mayor and council or just the ward, the appropriate ward counselor will be included in the response. And then, of course, if anything's ambiguous, we'll just address those on a case-by-case basis. For any questions that you have or any needs that you have as counselors directly, I can certainly be a resource for you, and then we can utilize this process to answer any questions that you have that come up directly. So you'll start to see this process. We're also working on enhancing our communication around ongoing items. Certainly items come to you for consideration. Staff will go away and do some work, but it might be a while before we bring that information back. And so we're working on some ways to make sure that we're keeping you informed on an ongoing basis about the work that's being done on the items that are of interest to you, and in particular around your areas of focus. We're also trying to think about ways to make sure that when there's a lot of detailed information in your work sessions, that we provide that information earlier whenever possible via email so that you have a little bit longer to see the information. It will continue to be provided in print with the AIS the week before as well. We also want to think about ways to provide information in different ways, such as videos or short updates after public hearings, and just other detailed memos that might be responsive to information that you're looking for. So you might be seeing us trying out some of those options to see how they work for you as well. In general, I also just want to let you know that the city communication team is working on just an overall communication strategy to improve our citywide communication strategies externally with our community, certainly with an effort to be cohesive and to build trust with our community. So if there aren't any questions on that, I wanted to move to talk about work sessions specifically and some options for consideration.
Chris?
Just a quick one. In your previous chart, can you go back to that? You have question or concern for staff. We get those all the time, and they come to us. It looks like you're proposing is that question, when it comes in, you will provide the initial response and then fold us in at some point, or are we still expected to provide maybe an initial response and CC you in that, or how do you envision that working?
Okay. If it comes into the mayor and council email overall, we will go ahead and say, thank you, we've received this, and then staff will begin working on it. But if a constituent has emailed you directly and you wanted some staff assistance with that, then you could CC me, and then I will initiate this process.
Okay, great, perfect.
You have to be in a queue. Do you need to talk at
For
this point?
after she's
For after,
finished
okay,
her.
gotcha.
And
Okay,
when
just
we
wanted to
get
make sure.
Discussion time.
Everything fall into a pit.
We're rebranding PIT as something positive.
It stands for?
Public Information
Public
Team.
information.
Yes, team. It's all about a good team. Okay.
Yes, please.
So one of the things that we've heard is an interest from council is making sure that when you have a work session poll, that you get information regarding your requests back in a timely manner. And one of the things that we've thought about is how can we make sure that we're doing that and being responsive to those work session requests while still juggling the other priorities that you're all aware of. So to that end, we've developed what we thought might be a two-tiered work session request process that might assist you in getting more information earlier on around the topic that you're requesting information on. And then we can identify, is a work session what's the best thing to initiate discussion, or is there another option that might meet your need as well? So initially, as you can see with this chart, the counselor work session request process would stay the same initially as far as the poll and the request, and then the polling numbers and criteria from that standpoint. If there is support for a request, our thought would be to have an initial staff meeting with the counselor that's requesting the information to make sure that there's a clear understanding of what's being asked for, and then staff can go back and gather some initial information, possibly provided it in a detailed memo or another format that would be helpful. And then if that meets what your need is and answers the question that you're looking for, then that information could be sent out to the whole council, and then the whole council can determine if they still want to have discussion around that. Or alternately, if that just is some good preliminary information, but you'd like more time to discuss it with council, then we will schedule it as usual.
Is it all right for us?
Yes, go right ahead.
Jumping in. So this makes me feel like there's gonna be a second round of work session polling then, because maybe the counselor who asked for the work session is satisfied with the answers, but other counselors want to have the discussion. I just worry that that proposal to say, well, did we answer your questions, yes or no, do we still need to have a discussion, might just lead then to all of us having to be polled again
Okay.
to decide if a work session is needed. Because I might be totally satisfied with what you brought forward, but someone else was like, no, I really need to dig deeper here. Or I think we would benefit by actually having a dialogue about it. So that's just one caveat about that proposal.
Okay, I have several people in the queue. So Alan, then Betty, then Mike.
Do I have 1 minute or 3 minutes?
Yeah. Just talk fast.
I like, that's a good concern to have, because the other people who supported it may not have the same response to the information provided. My question is sort of different, which is the way that we dispose of and act on resolutions. And they seem ad hoc, and they come in, and we just act on them, and somebody can propose them. There's no, we don't have a real formal policy about how we deal with that, except for it just gets forwarded. And I'm wondering if resolutions shouldn't be put into the work session kind of format as well, where you get 4 people saying, I want to move this forward, and then it can move forward and put on the agenda. Right now, it's just like, it just goes on there regardless. It could just be one person, and it could go down 7-1, and we had a great conversation, but is that an appropriate use of time when we're scrambling to get a million things done, especially like last session, the end of last session? So I'm wondering if we don't want to put resolutions into the work session format.
Interesting suggestion, yeah. All right, I'll let people respond to that. Betty?
Sometimes a resolution is in response to something that needs to be spoken about immediately.
Yeah, it can still accommodate that,
So,
I think.
yeah, but then on the other hand, there are times when people vote for something because they don't want to offend the person who asked for it. So that's, I like your idea of a 2-tier, except I would do it just meeting with the counselor who asked for it before you do the poll, to get a better idea of, if it's not totally clear, to get a better idea of what the person is wanting and what, in my case, I know I want, when it comes back, I want some possible motions, like the nuisance thing. We had a sort of a work session, but I wanted to know, have options of what we could do. But I think meeting with that counselor might be a good idea. Thank you. Less than a minute, right?
That was great. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. It really makes me nervous when I tend to agree with Alan, as I did just a minute ago. Thank you. I was going to say, however, as on you know, while I agree, I think more consideration is appropriate before bringing a resolution forward. I, as a counselor, have every right at items to bring up any motion that occurs to me, resolution or otherwise. So while making that rule seems like a more deliberative way to consider something like that, it won't end the process. If somebody feels strongly about it, they still have the right to do that. Number 2, as a counselor, if I say I want to have a work session poll, it's not always just, it's rarely the case it's because I have a question. It's because I deliberately want my colleagues to have a public discussion about an idea. Yeah. And so I'm not sure I like the railroad sidetrack option very much, because I don't know that I would ever ask for a work session poll where it wasn't my intent that if it gets the requisite 4, that we're going to have a public discussion about it, because I think that's actually the important part. I think we all still have the ability to ask questions, as I frequently do, and ask for a response via email or something like that. But I'm not comfortable with the idea of putting some other step in between me and, hey, I have work session poll. If 4 of us agree, then let's have work session on that. I'm not comfortable putting another step in between there. Just me.
Chris?
Thanks. Yeah, I would agree with what everybody's being said. I mean, the desire for efficiency and streamlining kind of has to end when you get to public's process and how the public work gets done. So if a work session is approved by 4 counselors, then you have the work session. There may be some conversation about what you can do to streamline work sessions so that they may not have to take 90 minutes or an hour. I mean, there may be possible to frame questions for work sessions in such a way that we can get through them more expeditiously. That's worth at least exploring. Maybe not every work session has to take a long time. Maybe some can happen fairly quickly, although when you do it in the public's business, it seems like nothing can ever get done in less than 45 minutes. a second part, I think, really gets around the notion of what can and cannot be done by a counselor. And you're absolutely right. Any counselor at any time can make a motion. And I would consider a resolution to be the same thing as a motion. But the question for me is, can that constitute a significant amount of work on the part of staff? In other words, if I want to bring up a resolution and I need staff to help me draft that resolution, and it's going to take staff a long time to do it, I didn't get the permission from the rest of the council to do that, so I think the 2-hour rule is definitely in place here. If I want the staff support for some idea I have, then we need to be much more communicative about the 2-hour rule, and I don't think that we have always taken that into account. I mean, I know it's very tempting for a staff member to say whatever a counselor wants, I will try to accomplish that. I'll try to meet that need, and I appreciate that fully. But if that work is going to take a significant amount of time, then you need to have the direction from the full council to take that amount of time to do it. And John has been great about opening up paths of communication with other staff and not having to go through him. And I think that's a great thing, but it also increases the potential for me going directly to Ethan or me going directly to Christy and say, you know, I'm real curious about this. Could you research this question for me? And Christy doesn't know if it's going to take 3 hours. Is that still okay? And so I think we need to be more specific about the fact that it's okay for staff to get back to us and say, you know, that's going to take a while to do. I really need direction from the full council to take the time to do it. Because it's kind of moved away from John making those calls, because now we're talking to lots of people within the organization, and we need to empower them to say, you know, that's going to take a while. I need to get direction from the full council. Otherwise, if we're able to just throw out motions and resolutions at will, which we have the right to do, we need to also be mindful of what time and effort it takes in order to do that.
I have Claire and then Alan.
Thank you.
Emily, okay.
So first, I just wanted to step back and say, at the first part of this conversation about mayor and council email responses, I have noticed more responsiveness on the part of staff to kind of general emails or emails about specific places. You know, we've been hearing about problems around the Whitebird Clinic recently, and I've really appreciated that someone on staff has taken the time to respond to that person in a way that the city councilor may like to respond, but may not have all those pieces of information right there handy to offer. So I think that's very positive, and I really want to acknowledge that I have noticed that. On the question of resolutions, in addition to what Councilor Clark mentioned, I had always assumed that the mayor and or city manager made the decision on, oh, sure, yes, we'll weave that conversation into our agenda this evening if it was something that came up at a last minute or, you know, day after tomorrow. Obviously, if your colleagues get a heads up ahead of time and have some chance to consider the resolution, you have more likelihood of support for the resolution than just showing up at the meeting to offer it. But I agree with Councilor Taylor that sometimes we might agree to a work session poll or something because we don't want to offend a colleague. But I also agree with Mike, and I have no trouble saying so, that when I ask for a work session, I think it's important to have that discussion in public. And that's the reason I'm specifically asking for a work session, rather than asking staff to respond to a series of questions that I may include all my colleagues in, because I would think they might like to see the answers. So I think I agree with the other comments about, you know, we need to continue to seek ways to do our work more efficiently, but I also think that members of this council take the work session time seriously and ask for those work sessions of each other when we think there's a reason for all of us to participate in the discussion. So I don't know that we need a further screen for holding that work session. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to let Emily go because she hasn't had a first run, and then Alan.
Thank you. The 2-hour staff assistance has always kind of confused me. I mean, I have no shyness about asking for help, and I really, really appreciate the quick and thorough responses I get. So what's the 2-hour rule about? What, are there things I've asked that were 2 hours I don't even know? Help me with these 2 hours.
I'll offer a couple thoughts and then Becky can weigh in. I think the general intent is that if staff is going to do some significant amount of work at the direction of one counselor, one, it feels a little bit like an equity issue, and two, that other counselors may or may not really want staff to be spending all their time on that. But I would say about this council, I think it has been very infrequent when anybody on this particular council has asked for work to be done by staff that's really out of bounds. And so I don't hear from staff around that. Periodically, when you're all talking about staff work, what we do appreciate is it feels like all of you are very conscious about staff's capacity, so I don't have a concern that people don't have that in their mind right now. So it's so far, we don't have this big issue that people are asking for an exorbitant amount. I do think it's good to remind all of us that, there could be times when that is, and then we'll come back and say, that feels like a lot of work, so we'll figure out how to come back to the council and make sure that the whole council wants us to be working on that particular thing. So it's not a big issue for us at the moment that I've heard of. So,
Thank you.
Alan?
Yeah, also, I just want to comment that I've noticed there's response time on emails has been quicker, and also the response back to people and the public has been much appreciated and rather quick too, and I think that's great. Keep that up. On the issue of the bifurcated two-tier work session process, I agree with Mike too. Every time that I put forward a work session poll, it's because I want to have the council have a conversation about changing a policy or creating a policy. So I've never put forward a poll that was answered with a document or something like that. It's about a policy or changing it or creating it. And so I don't know that we're going to get very far with that, the two-tier system. You could try it, but I don't know. If you come to me, I'm going to say, well, I want to have a conversation about this. About that, which is why I brought up the resolutions, is resolutions tend to be a policy conversation that the council has about a particular issue. And it's not too different than how we do work session polls. It's about, shall we support this particular policy or make this kind of statement? And that's a council policy conversation to take a position on a particular issue. And in that sense, it's not any different than a work session poll request. I know that sometimes they need to come up and they need to be done quickly because their time is essence of things like that, but that's kind of more of the exception than the rule. Usually these things take time that we bake them and they don't have an immediate turnaround time. So I think there's a lot of times when we're taking a position on a resolution that it just kind of seemed natural to me that it should fit. And we're taking up council time on something that might be just something that one particular counselor wants to do. And that's why we have the work session poll, because we want to have more than just one counselor take that up. So to me, resolutions seem to fit in that same kind of rubric. Not that, and people vote for council work session polls for one reason or another.
Like the person or don't.
Or don't.
Betty?
This is something that really fits in with the process session. When you're talking about the 2 hours, I was here when that was started, and I could say something about it right then if I had a chance. And the process, the way we do things, if you want to respond to what someone says, you have to wait till 8 people talk. And it's really awkward. I don't know what to do about it, but it's something I think we should be able to do something about. But the 2 hours anyway, I remember when it started, and I'm the only one who was here, I think. And the reason was that there was a counselor who it was felt was taking too much staff time. and staff were, at that time, afraid to, I don't think that's true now, but afraid not to comply with what the counselor wanted, and had complained that this one person was taking up hours and hours and hours. And that, but I thought at the time, and I still think that 2 hours is not a good thing. I think if it takes longer than that, it should take longer. I don't. And the other thing I wanted to say was, and I hope we'll consider this thing that I just mentioned that just floated over everybody, but it is awkward if you have something that is really relevant in relation to what someone just said. It would be very good if you could say it right then, quickly. I don't know how to do it, but the mayor will figure that out probably. And I do like it that most of the time now, if I ask a question for a constituent, I'm copied on the answer. I think that's really important that I know that it's been cleared up. It doesn't always happen, but it's been happening more. And it sounds as if Becky is now our PSO. Is that it? Public Service Officer?
Well, I would say as a council contact, I would be your council contact for that, but our staff that answer the phones are all very well versed in a lot of the questions that come their way.
Always, and people who don't have time or the energy to figure out whom to call. And, well, maybe you could call this person, you call that person, you get a recording, press 1 or press 2 or press 3, and then you just give up. So I still think we need a PSO, but I take it that you're, for our purposes, not the general public, for our purposes, you will, and that's good to know, but, and I think, did you have something, did you want to respond to what I said? Okay. That's all, thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, quickly, I don't think we've done a lot of violation on the 2-hour rule either. I'm always questioning it for myself because I know I have questions and I'm always questioning about it. So it's good to hear that we're not really abusing that, because I agree it has in the past. An underlying theme that goes through many of the conversations we're trying to have is going back to rule number 1, which is no surprises. And I think whether it's motions or resolutions or work session topics or other things, really we need to figure out the structures and the systems in place to ensure that no counselor individually or collectively gets surprised by any topic or any issue or any subject. I know that there were times in the past where counselors might wait until one counselor went off to a conference and then they would propose a motion at the next meeting knowing they would get the votes to pass it and surprise everybody. We haven't done that since I've been on the council, and I've been very grateful for it. And we've made a real effort to try to telegraph our intentions around intended motions or intended resolutions. And I think we need to reaffirm and really try to adhere to as much lead time as possible. I think 24 hours is really squeezing the envelope pretty tight in terms of being able to think about a motion that might be proposed. But the more lead time we can have, as was said before, you're going to get a lot more support for a potential motion or resolution if people have had time to think about it. And so I think throwing it out there as a surprise, my inclination is to say, no, I'm not really prepared to vote on that issue. I need time to think about it. And so I think the no surprise rule needs to underlie everything that we're talking about here today, up to where we are now and the rest of the agenda, hopefully, that you'll get to, is really consider the fact that we as counselors are very sensitive to being surprised by constituents, being surprised by issues, being surprised by current events. And the degree to which you can relieve those surprises is how incredibly grateful we'll be that we can do our jobs much more efficiently.
So before we go on to the next, I just wondering if you have a good enough sense about where the council is on this. It's sounding like the two-tier thing is not super popular, and that there's some disagreement around how we deal with resolutions and how quickly, and maybe just an admonition that everyone try to give the rest of council notice. So that's my takeaway, and I'm seeing some nods around the room, so I think that's where we stand.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. Well, thank you all for your consideration and discussion and direction on that. That's helpful. I will emphasize that we will continue as work session polls come through. Staff will continue to connect with you and make sure they understand the question, and we will certainly work towards being efficient in terms of our use of time. But thank you.
thank you. We have a next. Do you need to speak on this topic, or can we let her go on to the next part of her presentation?
I just wanted to say something about surprises. I don't think they're necessarily bad, and I don't.
Agreed.
And I don't know what kind of penalty you're going to exact if someone comes in with a surprise, that's all.
Okay, I'll think of one. Thank you.
Give me detention.
Okay, please.
Perfect. I think as the end of the last grouping of council sessions identified that we do have times that we do have a number of topics that you want to make sure that you discuss before break. And so that includes the need to sometimes add a work session. And we wanted to talk about the option of adding work sessions on public hearing nights. And if we were to do so, what timeframes make the most sense to you on that? One option would be to move the public hearing to 5:30 PM and then do the work session item after that. The other option would do the work session item at 5:30 and then continue to hold the public hearing at 7:30. And there may be a third option we haven't thought of that could meet your needs as well, so.
Okay, I have Betty and Claire in the queue here.
One time when surprises are really bad is to add a work session during the night meeting that we didn't know about. Which, the evening meeting, which happened with the police chief recently. And adding work sessions at the end of a long evening is really bad.
That's bad.
As for adding meetings, it's one thing I wanted to talk about in process. I think if a meeting is added, it should be acceptable to all the counselors instead of just the majority, if it's a meeting at a time when we don't usually meet. Same thing with extending the time of a meeting. It could be that one person has an urgent dental appointment, for example. Not me, I might make mine early, but while he's still awake, alert. But I think that we shouldn't extend the time, and if somebody really has to leave, that should not happen. That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Claire?
So I agree with a lot of what Councilor Taylor just said. I think I'm okay with adding a 5:30 work session to a night that we have a public hearing scheduled, as long as we have some good notice. Generally speaking, that's not a challenge for my schedule. I absolutely agree adding work sessions to the end of a night that we've had public forum, which we never know how long that might go. And public hearings is very tricky, and I don't think we get our best work done under those circumstances. So I would ask that we try to avoid that as much as possible, because I don't necessarily think the outcome lands where we hope. I would suggest keeping it with the public hearings at 7:30, because that's what the public is used to. And while some of them may prefer to come to the earlier time, I think that's traditionally when our public hearing time has been, and I wouldn't see a good reason to change it. And then I agree with Councilor Taylor, much prefer to add a work session to a night of a public hearing rather than to a Wednesday at noon or something like that we wouldn't normally be meeting on. I think that covers, there was one more thing, but I've forgotten it, so it's fine. Thanks.
Alan?
Yeah, if we're going to add a meeting, this is the day that I would like to add the meeting, because I'm already scheduled to be here. So if I just come 2 hours earlier, that's a lot easier for me to do. I always assumed that the public hearings were at 7:30 because that was better for the public. So I'm assuming that's correct, as opposed to 5:30, which often I think would be difficult for people to do. 7:30 makes more sense. So doing the work session beforehand makes more sense, and keeping the public hearing, and the fact that we have been doing it for so many years that people are used to hearings at 7:30.
Yep.
Yes, manager.
Would it be worth just assuming there's going to be a work session on those public hearing dates and then if we don't need it, we cancel. And the reason why I say that is we also get exhausted by the end. You never know how long public forum's going to last, but there is a lot of work that you undertake. And if we just don't have the meeting time, I think people also get frustrated that your item never gets addressed. And so maybe we just assume that we'll schedule those and then we can cancel them if we don't need them. And there won't be a surprise that way.
And the likelihood that we won't need them is very slim.
I think that's
seems
true,
to me.
particularly if we really consciously
Right,
don't
so-
try to add anything to the Monday night. I think
Yeah.
things are going to slip
So,
into there.
so realistically, you're just accepting that you're going to have 3 Monday night council
And
meetings.
we'll try to not if we don't need them.
Right.
But not next Monday, right?
Not next Monday,
wouldn't be
no,
adding
that's a
them at
little,
the-
that's too quick.
Too
I
You wouldn't
think
be
that's
adding
what-
them at
so-
the very last
So we
minute.
we would, I think the first time would be the October month, not next Monday, you're correct.
Okay.
No surprises. Okay, yeah.
Correct, so you have time off, see? We're just trying to make it easy on you,
Next
Alan.
Monday's my birthday.
Oh, right, and it's Betty's birthday, so we can't have a meeting then. Okay, so that was clear, right? All right,
Yeah.
great. On to the next, we take 3 minutes, what are you thinking about the next? You want to at least introduce this in 3 minutes?
I have one question at the
Okay,
end.
all right, gotcha.
So
It will be really fast.
Okay.
We-
Let me, before you start, can we extend, can people handle?
to extend 10
Having
minutes.
just had this conversation? 10
Move to
minutes?
extend
Can
10.
we take 10 minutes? 5 minutes?
No.
10 minutes, okay. All in favor of extending 10 minutes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, great, thank you.
7.
Oh, just 7, sorry, yeah, we're missing Greg.
Counting an empty chair even.
We have heard some interest in revisiting around the current meeting minutes and the meeting minutes process itself. And so I just wanted to do a reminder of the current process and then present some potential options that you've seen before for discussion to see if you have an interest in continuing to discuss that. And if so, we can bring that information back at a later date. Currently, meeting minutes are the responsibility of CMO staff. We meet the state requirements with that. They're available for approval at the next meeting, and detail is available by webcast. And we are adding the enhancement of adding links to the webcast into the meeting minute document itself to make it more easy to navigate. So it means that if someone were to pull up the meeting minute PDF, then they would be able to just link to the website. If
You
they
have to be online.
Correct.
To see a webcast, too.
Link to a website without being online.
Well, you don't have to be online to read minutes right now.
And we've had about 14,000 hits in the last year to your meeting minutes and agendas. So,
14,000?
yes.
you're very popular, Alan.
Most of them are Most of them are us.
Not quite, not quite.
Okay. Okay. So these are some options that you've seen in the past, and so I just wanted to revisit those with you to see if there's an interest in us bringing back more information to exploring them or to discuss whether or not the current process is meeting your needs. So at no additional cost, continuing our current meeting minutes and then adding the verbatim closed captioning transcript is an option. That should actually say about 1 week. So the next council meeting is when you get your current meeting minutes, whenever possible. The less than 25,000 option is continue the current meeting minutes, but have verbatim a cleaned up transcript. And that would include information related to who said what, I believe. And then in the 30 to 40K range, we would be replacing the current meeting minutes for approval, and there would be more synthesized content, so high-level description of what information was discussed and shared. That turnaround time also would be longer from that standpoint. And then the last option is more really going back to the model of having a minutes recorder. And it would replace the current meeting minutes for approval. There would be detailed minutes as provided prior to the change in practice. But again, there is time that takes, so that would be both costly and would add some time to the time frame that the meeting's minutes were turned around.
Okay, Comments on this? Betty?
Why does it cost that much? It's the salary, salary of one person?
Salary and benefits, and then, I don't know what else is included in that. Do you have a thought? Salary and benefits, yes, of an FTE.
That takes a full-time person.
I think one option would be if we were to do that, we would also try to figure out, are there some other needs that could be met as well?
The person who used to do it was not just working full-time at doing our minutes. She had other duties, I think.
Yeah, I think
So I'm just questioning whether it would cost that much just for the minutes.
What are you talking about?
It's a part of 100,000. Is that what it used to cost?
For a full-time minutes recorder?
Yeah.
I believe so,
But
with
she was doing other jobs too, so it wasn't just for the minutes.
other minutes, yes.
For other groups maybe, but. So it's not right to say that it cost 100,000 just for the
If there
council.
was a way to do a less than full-time person, we could certainly look into that.
Someone who's doing some other jobs now. Good. Okay.
Okay, Emily?
Thank you. I don't get my minutes the week after. The minutes come in a big chunk for approval every second Monday or so.
We try to have them available for every council meeting, for the next council meeting where council takes action. We don't always meet that, but that's our goal. And then, of course, when there's a break or something else happens, then you're going to get a bigger batch of them. Generally, we can turn them around.
Generally, I find I don't have them soon enough, which is no criticism on you. I just need them sooner. My frustration with the current minutes is, one, they're often a month or two later that I get them, and that there's so little information in them. You know, we roughly talked about these things. So then I have to go back to the webcast to see who said what. So at the very least, I would like a closed captioning transcript, which I assume is just a printout of what the closed captioning would say.
It would be every
Every
and ah.
and
Not
and
be attributed, I don't think.
The whole thing.
The next option would be, there would be a little bit more attribution, and some of those hesitations or stutters or they would be cleaned up to some degree.
I guess of all the options, B would be the best for me personally, because for it's, a lot of weeks later, a lot of times we don't get back to it till a year later. It doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. Sometimes we've had stuff just whipping right through, and the only way to do it is to go look at the tape. And that takes a lot of time. It takes as long as being at the meeting, and I want to be able to look at something and scan through it and find out who is saying what. So I guess B is my best bet. But I really feel like I do not have enough information from the minutes that we have now, and I feel that it takes time that I don't always have to go back and find out what people actually said. So we're kind of operating in the dark without having that. Thanks.
Claire?
Thank you. So what is the difference between, and kind of how the content would show up between B and D? Because one is verbatim, cleaned up transcript, and one is detailed minutes. So I'm not sure what the distinction is there.
The D represents a minutes recorder who's listening to the conversation, synthesizing what the person is saying, and so it would be very more prosy, I guess.
The way it used to be.
The way it used to be, yeah.
Okay. For those who remember how it used to be.
And B's just the correct.
So it had more context
Yes,
than a verbatim transcript would have.
Correct.
The verbatim transcript would say Councilor Surratt, and then whatever they could glean from the audio of the meeting. Okay. Well, excuse me. So, and then I'm wondering if it's possible as a way to address some of Counselor Semple's challenges with the timing of when we get meeting minutes, regardless of which of these options we choose. You know, I'm wondering if our minutes are compiled and then held on to until the council packet is sent out. And if there could be a protocol where once the minutes were compiled, whether or not the council packet was about to go out, they could be shared with us in draft form. That's my medication timer. That you usually don't hear because we're usually not in session there.
Sorry, my apologies. Okay, have you had your questions answered? Claire, are you done?
Yes.
Okay, Chris?
Well, I mean, they didn't respond to my question, but.
I was just going to let this move forward while you addressed your timing.
2 hours or something like that.
Okay, hang on, I've got Chris, and then, did you want to talk?
I just want to get into the queues.
Okay, you're in.
Yeah, I recognize the desire to have something right away, and at least for me, the video could be the thing you have right away, because that's like the next day, right? You could just watch the video. I approach minutes from, I think, perhaps a more historical perspective. Because there's been instances where I've wanted to go back and look at minutes from 2010 or look at minutes from 2012. And if I were going back and looking at minutes from 2010, then they were minutes, they would be of no use to me. That would be, you know, I would then have to go back and look at a video and go through it, and that might take hours and hours. Whereas when I go back to look at minutes from 2010, I can find what I need in 5 minutes. And so for me, the difference is I can look at the written minutes and find what I need from 10 years ago in 5 minutes, or I can watch a tape. Now, if the tape is keyword indexed so that I can put in the word, you know, whatever, and it will take me right to that portion of the tape, that's helpful. But it's also nice to be able to see the actual context, as you talk about, in print. And so if I had my druthers, I liked the minutes the way they used to be. It not only provided what people said, it provided the context, and if I wanted to look at it 10 years later, I'd have a much better sense of what was actually being talked about. I know a lot when I was working with the legislature, there was a lot of comment about legislative intent. You know, you'd see an ORS or you'd see a bill and you say, well, what was the legislative intent in putting this together? And you couldn't get that unless you went back and looked at the minutes and see what the context of the conversation was. You get that from the video, but you can also get it from a more complete set of minutes, which you can read more quickly. I can read minutes faster than I can watch a video. At least I can get to the point that I want. So if I had my preferences, for historical reasons, I think we should still have the video, and we could keyword index it if we wanted to for more immediate use. But I'm thinking of somebody 10, 20 years from now when they're trying to figure out council intent, it'd be nice to have a set of minutes where you could actually get that sense in addition to the video. That would just be my, and I know it costs more, but we could try to figure out the way to do it as cost effectively as possible and still get at least the sense of what those minutes used to be.
Mike?
I far prefer the video indexed in the manner it is today above anything else we've ever done, far. I also have one other subject that's different and but I've been waiting until the end and I'm going to run out of time, so I'm just going to ask. 5 months ago I asked, do I need a specific budget motion, which I think I have the votes for, in order to have a system of technology at our table that will enable our meetings to go faster? The kind we once had, where we had an electronic board and we had the ability to interact with it and buttons so that the meeting moves more quickly and maybe we get to more stuff. And was told, no, you don't, we're going to have that.
What I think, I said
I
you
asked,
didn't.
do I need a motion? And I was told no.
You don't need the motion for the budget. The issue was more about the practicality of doing it, and we were happy to talk more about that or provide that information. My understanding is it's not just a simple fix, but eventually I'll let Becky talk to that or provide some additional information on that.
I am aware of a system that is reasonably so, is an upgrade to what we used to have, which was infinitely better than how we do things now, and we would move quickly. Respectfully, Mayor, I think we could move more quickly through things with that system.
Maybe you
and
need to
so,
use white paper.
Again, I asked because I didn't want to have to just, force it from the table with a vote, but.
and we can circle back on that. Maybe what we can do on the meeting minutes piece is, as part of our budget process, we can also come back with what it costs to do some of these things. I just think we should put in some context of overall, I don't know if $100,000 is still the right number. That's not an insignificant amount of money. And so, but there may be some additional options to get to the written minutes that are in context, that maybe they don't do as much as they used to. So I would just suggest as we come back as part of the whole conversation with the budget, we can also bring back that conversation around how do we get, if D is one of those preferences, how do we get to D, and it may be a different cost in a different way, and that way you're in the context of the budget as well, and we're happy to do that.
I can see Betty is needing to make a comment, and Alan.
We used to frequently have corrections to the minutes, and that was because we had minutes that we could read. And we were asked to, and we tried to, a day or two ahead of time, notify the rest of the council of the corrections we wanted to make, so that if they wanted to check to see if they were okay, they could, in which case it would go very quickly. Approve the minutes as corrected, including corrections requested by blank and blank. And it was fairly easy to look through, especially if you forgot what you said yourself. Look through for your name and then see, is that correct? And then if you want to recheck it, you could go to the video, but the video takes a lot of time. That's all.
Alan.
I'm okay with option A. I think in 5 years, we won't have written minutes.
Yeah.
And I'd rather spend our time enhancing a system that's going to be here for the long term. If we could enhance our system so that we could search on the video so that you don't have to spend enough time. If we could figure out how to do that, that's a much preferred system. So you can just go bing and hear exactly what you want to hear. Then you would be. The other thing I would say is that I think very, very few people actually read our minutes. The cost effectiveness or bang for the buck for doing $100,000 on this, I understand the public transparency part of it, but I think that this whole system is shifting and it's going to be gone in a couple of years, and I'd rather see us spending money on enhancing the webcast video and working it that way.
We could provide more information on all of these options, so it doesn't look like everybody's agreed yet on where you want, but we can provide a little bit more information on any of these that can help you get to a place where eventually you'd like to be, if that would be helpful.
That sounds great and appropriate, and thank you very much. And we are over, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.